This film deals with one of the most serious problems facing modern man, the skyrocketing traffic accident deaths. Every year, traffic accidents account for more deaths than many of our most feared diseases. Law enforcement officials, automobile manufacturers, research groups, and legislative bodies are all working constantly to increase the safety of vehicles in the highways. However, the greatest burden must be placed on you, the driver. It is your judgment error, not unsafe vehicles nor poor road conditions, that result in the majority of the traffic deaths. We of the Ohio State Highway Patrol hope this film's vitally important safety message stays with you. It could save your life and the lives of those you love.
Death struck almost on the doorstep of this patrol post that particular evening. The crowded station wagon turned off the interstate freeway and proceeded down the exit ramp. The woman driver either did not see the stop sign at the end of the exit ramp or chose to ignore it. A split second later, there was a blinding crash as a 2.5-ton truck slammed into the midsection of the station wagon. Here is the needless slaughter that resulted. This is the teenage son of the driver. He was one of only 2 survivors in the demolished station wagon. His 14-year-old brother was the other. Both were severely injured. Their mother was killed instantly. A woman spectator wept as she stared at the lifeless bodies of the children and the new toys on the seat beside them. 6 died in the station wagon. There were 3 men in the truck. Fortunately, they sustained only minor injuries, as did the 2 women and a young girl in the car which rammed the guardrail to avoid hitting the truck and the station wagon. The young mother had driven 120 miles, and perhaps the children were restless and noisy. This made it difficult to concentrate on her driving. And maybe she turned off the freeway to rest a while, or to get the children something to eat, maybe. Only one thing is certain: she did not stop. And for that one moment of inattention, she paid a terrible price. And next year, more than 6,000 persons will die within a few feet of a sign like this. 6 feet in this case. A young father, his pregnant wife, and 2-year-old son were on their way to visit relatives in a nearby town. According to witnesses, their white car did not hesitate before entering the intersection. The young father either did not see the stop sign or chose to ignore it. The driver of an approaching truck said it appeared the driver did not take his foot from the accelerator. A split second later, the truck slammed into the midsection of the white car. The truck driver was only slightly injured and climbed from the overturned cab and peered hopefully into the wreckage that was once a family car. The young father was dead, his skull fractured. Beside him was his young wife, also dead. She would have soon given birth to the child she carried in her body. In the rear seat was the twisted body of the 2-year-old son. He died of a crushed chest. Did the young father fail to see the stop sign, or did he ignore it? No one will ever know, but on the highway, the penalty for failure to see or failure to obey is often instant death. Three teenagers coming home from a party helped police officers reconstruct this tragedy. The shiny new car with racing stripes and the extra wide tires was racing the traffic light. The teenagers would catch up with him now and then at a red light. And then they caught up with the racer for the last time. And this is what they saw. A police investigation revealed that the driver lost control of the car, hit the brakes, skidded over 150 feet, slammed into a large oak tree a few feet from the road, and the tremendous impact wrapped the car almost completely around the tree. The 23-year-old driver was alone in the car, and it's safe to say that he was dead before the collision dust settled on the street. An autopsy revealed enough physical injury to kill 3 people, and the report contained another item, that the young driver had been drinking excessively. He probably never felt better before the darkness swallowed him, and he won't have another chance. But you do. It was 8:20 on a Wednesday morning. A fine rain was falling, and the 19-year-old boy was late for work. He pushed his car to well above the speed limit. As he neared the crest of the hill, he lost control on the wet pavement. He skidded for 115 feet into the opposite lane and off the left side of the road, where he hit a culvert, which acted as a catapult, and sent him airborne for 35 feet. He was still airborne when he hit a utility pole about 5 feet above the ground. The force snapped the pole like a matchstick. It took highway patrolmen, ambulance attendants, and wrecker crews more than an hour and a half to get the boy out of the demolished car. The floorboard of the car clamped around the boy's legs like a steel trap. They tried to make the boy as comfortable as possible as they worked to separate metal from flesh. His head wounds were bandaged, and a plastic sheet was draped around him to keep him dry and a blanket to keep him warm. He was in shock and blue from cold, but at least he didn't feel the pain. That would come later. He attempted to help his rescuers with feeble gestures and sounds they didn't understand. And finally, they got him out. He was a very lucky boy. He was still late for work, about a month, and there were many nights when he screamed in pain, but he lived and had plenty of time to think about betting his life against speed. And next year, more than 17,000 persons will die because of excessive speed, the most ironical of all traffic offenses. Think about it. You're late or in a hurry, so you try to use your car as a time machine to take you 10 or 15 minutes into the past, so you'll arrive at your destination on schedule. The trouble is that thousands who try it never get there at all. Instead, they are taken ahead in time to the end of their life, death. This 32-year-old man was playing Russian roulette, but he probably didn't know it. He'd been drinking at a local bar and was on his way home. This was later established. Add speeding, and you have a mixture as lethal as dynamite. Throw in the fact that the driver was peering through a peephole scraped on his heavily frosted windshield, and it borders on suicide. The car hit the end of the concrete bridge, slid along the bridge rail for 80 feet, shot 64 feet across the highway to the guardrail, traveled another 44 feet, flipped on its side, throwing out the driver, dragging him an additional 42 feet. Oh yes, the deck was really stacked against him that Friday at 1:31 in the morning. Drinking, excessive speed, a frost-covered windshield, any one of which could have started the car on its 223-foot wild, whirling dance of death. This is how it ended. If there's any question in your mind, he is dead, crushed by his own car. Police officers tried to free the body, but were forced to wait until a wrecker arrived to lift the car. Oddly enough, only minor damage was done to the car, just a few $100s. It was the opinion of every law officer at the scene that if the young man had been wearing a seatbelt, there were none in the car, he would undoubtedly have survived the crash and most likely would have suffered only minor injury. He didn't, and he paid with his life. But that's far from the end of it. His wife and 3 small children will also pay for a long time to come. With more than 50,000 motorists killed annually on our highways, the traffic death rate has solidly entrenched itself as the nation's 3rd greatest killer, second only to heart ailments and cancer. Death is now a common sight on our highways. Our nation's prosperity has afforded us nearly 100 million vehicles, with more than 103 million licensed drivers. But prosperity cannot bring responsibility. The serious responsibility that is thrust upon everyone who sits behind a steering wheel. And he is also a sign of our times. A new breed of law enforcement officer is typified by the highly trained men who make up the Ohio State Highway Patrol. At the new multi-million-dollar training academy, prospective patrolmen undergo comprehensive instruction on every facet of law enforcement. Specializing in traffic control and the many aspects of accident prevention. They are trained to handle any situation, anywhere, at any time. They are a new breed of professional law enforcement officer the Ohio State Highway Patrol is using to spearhead the fight against traffic fatalities in the Buckeye State. Usually, it's the younger drivers who are guilty of the majority of highway speed violations. But some people never grow up, even if they live to be 1,000. The new year was just 48 hours old. The road was covered with ice and snow, and it was dark. Driving conditions were treacherous by any standard, and driving at the posted speed limit, much less exceeding it, was nothing short of suicide. The 77-year-old man moved along at high speed. Beside him, his 73-year-old wife. Maybe the man figured his many years of driving experience made him immune to accidents, but he hit the bridge abutment head on. The car flipped down the embankment and burst into flames. The elderly couple was trapped inside and could not be freed until some time later when firemen extinguished the blaze. Was burned beyond recognition, and it was only through charred identification papers that their identity was discovered and relatives notified of the tragedy. It was impossible for authorities to determine the cause of death, the impact, or the flames. But the cause of the accident was pinpointed: excessive speed. A strange set of circumstances led up to this accident in which 3 young people were seriously injured. This young woman received a fractured jaw in addition to head and ankle injuries. Her female friend received comparable injuries. The male passenger in the other auto received painful back injuries. Investigating officers determined the following. The white car was involved in a minor accident at an intersection. No one was injured, and there was only minor damage, but the car was left standing on the wrong side of the highway without lights. Exactly 3 minutes after the first accident, the red car approached the intersection. The driver failed to see the vehicle blocking her traffic lane and crashed head-on into the white car. The highway was straight and level, and the pavement was dry. 2 lessons are to be learned from this accident. The first is that one should be ever on the alert for the unexpected and to give one's undivided attention to driving. The second is that any time you are forced to stop on the highway, make certain that you are able to provide some sort of visual signal to oncoming traffic. The epidemic of death on the highway continues to spread as if American motorists were suddenly obsessed with the urge to destroy themselves or someone else. There was no apparent reason for this head-on collision. It happened early one summer morning when the 2-lane highway was lightly traveled. The weather was clear, the road was straight, level, and dry, with neither driver having his view obstructed. The pickup truck and the flatbed semi met head-on. The pickup truck was driven back a distance of 179 feet off the road and into a field. Both men in the pickup truck were dead before their truck stopped rolling. The driver of the semi died 3 days later of head injuries. Did the driver of the pickup see the approaching semi? We'll never know. This one we do know about. A truck driver had a ringside seat at the slaughter. We quote the statement he made to patrolmen following the crash. I was traveling south. It was about 7 o'clock in the morning. Another southbound car started around me. And as the car was going around me, I noticed a northbound car coming. The car passing me was almost in front of my truck. I saw her brake lights suddenly come on. Then she appeared to lose control and struck the northbound car head on. Parts of the car that had passed me then struck my truck. I'd moved off onto the berm as far as possible. Well, that's how it happened, and this is the result. The young woman driver who panicked while passing the truck was killed. The 19-year-old girl riding beside her was severely injured. The driver of the other car had recently celebrated his 19th birthday. He was pronounced dead at the accident scene. Driving is a very serious business. Deadly serious. More than 100 persons die on our highways every day, but it's doubtful there was a stranger accident that January day than the one you're about to see. A young male hitchhiker was thumbing to a neighboring town to visit friends. A lone male motorist was traveling in the same direction and felt like a little company. They stopped for a cup of coffee, a few minutes of relaxation and conversation. It would break up the trip, make the time go faster, especially when there were two drivers. You have a driver's license? Asked the friendly driver. Sure thing, smiled the hitchhiker. Well, what luck, thought the helpful driver. He can drive and I can catch a little sleep. Great. Two police officers witnessed what took place a few miles later. The hitchhiker lost control of the station wagon. It swerved across the double yellow line of the 4-lane highway into the path of an oncoming panel truck delivering a load of morning newspapers. The impact made front page news. The station wagon carrying the two men was completely cut in two. Both men were thrown out. The hitchhiker was killed instantly. The Good Samaritan who let him drive was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The driver of the panel truck was pinned in the truck but died before he could be freed. It was later learned that the hitchhiker did not have a driver's license. The helpful motorist trusted to luck. And as so often happens when the driver relies on luck, death has the last laugh. When you speed, go through a stop sign, have a few drinks before hitting the road, you're putting your life on the line. Is it worth it? If you think otherwise, that cars are playthings to be used irresponsibly, then the next accident should greatly interest you. It was 11 o'clock on a Friday night, and the trio was out on the town. Ray, 26, Bud, 20, and Nancy, 16. Ray was driving. Ray saw the warning lights and the guard arm, but he still thought he could make it across the tracks before the train blocked the crossing. The train was going 40. Ray figured he had more than enough speed to beat the lumbering locomotive. That must have been his last thought. He swerved around the guardrail and shot across the tracks. He didn't make it. The locomotive slid into the passenger side of the car. The engineer applied the brakes, but not before knocking the car 57 feet up the tracks and into a telephone pole adjacent to the right-of-way. It took the locomotive 36 car lengths to come to a halt. Upon impact, Ray and his two passengers were catapulted from the car like rag dolls. All three were killed instantly. Their staring eyes seemed to still hold the horror they saw a second or two before their death. Police records indicate that there were about 10,000 murders in our country last year, with the number steadily rising. Most of them are not premeditated, thought out in advance. Instead, they're committed in a moment of rage, desperation, passion, while the assailant is under the influence of alcohol or drugs. For a split second, a man loses control of himself for the first and only time of his life. Conditions for it are perfect: extreme mental depression, social pressure, financial need, alcohol. It could almost be termed accidental. Inevitably, he is punished for the most heinous of all crimes, murder. But how does this death differ from this death? One is committed in a moment of crazed emotion, the other in a moment of carelessness or neglect. In one case, the murder weapon is a gun, and the assailant is punished. The other case, the weapon is an auto, and the assailant never sees the inside of a jail. Next year, thousands of Americans will die on our highways. They'll be murdered by loved ones or strangers, or they will murder themselves. If these victims were placed head to toe, they would make a line more than 50 miles long. And none of them believed it could happen to them. Maybe you think the same way. Next year's death line will be 2 miles longer. By the way, in the time it took you to watch this film, the line grew 15 feet.
Another curve, and the crowd on the sidewalk gasp in horror as the big black car hits an unexpected spot of water and begins to skid. Will Chief Mitty smash up also? Mitty's young jaw grows tense, but he knows exactly what to do. As his own speeding wheels hit the water and the rear end of his car skids to the left, he turns his own front wheels in the direction of the skid and ever so gently eases his foot up from the accelerator pedal. As the great white car passes the smoking black wreck and straightens out, the congratulatory sirens of the other police cars seem to say, "Gee whiz, why the heck does J. Edgar Mitty keep on wasting his time as the youngest police chief in our nation when he could be the greatest race driver in the whole world?" I hate to disillusion you, but J. Edgar is not actually the world's youngest police chief. He's not actually driving the car. And these hairbreadth saves from disaster by J. Eddie's quick thinking are happening in the best of all places for disaster, his imagination. He's playing a game we might call, what'll you do if? And you know, maybe he is saving lives. Not now, but a few years from now, when he's behind the wheel of a moving car. And you know something else? When that time comes, this seemingly wacky daydreamer will be one of the smoothest, sharpest, and healthiest drivers around. Why? Because almost nothing that happens on the road will ever catch him by surprise. Everything that can happen has happened in his imagination, and he has already figured out in advance what he will do if. And unlike this driver, he'll do the right thing, as though by instinct, saving those precious moments of what'll I do time. Precious moments that make the difference between smooth, pleasant driving and sudden death or a killing repair bill. In fact, many of the smoothest drivers in the road today, including you, of course, play the same game of what'll you do if, whether consciously or as a matter of habit. That's why they're good. And they play the game in two versions, present and future, long range and short range. The short-range game, present tense, is the one you play every moment your car is in motion. Jim's eyes are always ranging ahead of his car, like radar, alert for telltale indications and warnings. Here's an obvious one, a bouncing ball. And thinks Jim, what'll I do if... By anticipating, he saved those precious seconds between seeing and braking. And did you notice he braked not with a jerk, but smoothly? Here's a telltale more subtle. See it? Momentary puff of exhaust smoke from that parked car. Will the driver look back? He did. By driving ahead of his car, anticipating, Jim sees and interprets little things. Today is dry and sunny, but see that patch of wet road up ahead from a lawn sprinkler? For that driver, it was an emergency. And he recovered well, but he never should have skidded in the first place. And here's the long-range version of what'll you do if. Now, obviously, this driver isn't one of us, because we would never hit our brakes hard on a slippery surface. For this situation, like J. Edgar, you rehearse in your mind what you'll do to recover from a skid. First, steer in the same direction the rear end is skidding. Then, as the car straightens, straighten the front wheels. Act quickly, but be careful not to overcorrect. Steer in the same direction rear end is skidding. As the car straightens, straighten front wheels. Don't lift your foot from the gas pedal too quickly, and don't slam on your brakes. Let's anticipate another kind of emergency. What'll you do if, sometimes, suddenly you have no brakes to slam? First, you pump your brake pedal to try to work up pressure. You shift to lower gear. You try your parking brake. In most situations, one of these measures would bring you to a stop. But on this mountain road, you may need still another out, a side road with an uphill grade. What do you do from now on? You'll have your service station give your brakes a periodic checkout. Sometimes an unforeseeable emergency is caused by that other driver. If you've been forced off the pavement like this, you know the problem. But you've rehearsed how to get back. You grip the wheel firmly, let up on the gas, check to the rear, and, if you're clear, cut back sharply onto the pavement. Here's another sudden emergency, a sticking gas pedal. A driver who hadn't rehearsed this very happening in her imagination might think the answer is to turn off the ignition. But that could also turn off the power steering and power brakes. But she has figured out ahead of time what she'll do if. Shift into neutral, of course, to disconnect the speeding engine from the wheels. Come to a stop off the side of the road and then turn off that roaring engine. In a way, the expert anticipates what he'll do if, like a baseball player. For example, before the pitcher goes into his stretch, that shortstop out there has figured out if it's a fly ball, he'll do one thing, a ground ball another. If the man on first steals, still another. There are major league drivers, too. And one way you can spot them on the road is that they don't compete with each other. They play on the same team. Like getting on an expressway. They don't try to beat out the other drivers. They blend into the flow. Signal. Make sure they're clear. Then they don't creep into everybody's way, but quickly accelerate up to the speed of the lane. When he's on the expressway, the big league driver will give a break to his unknown teammates who are entering. Maybe he'll have to slow down a bit, or maybe he'll speed up to move ahead. But whichever, he makes room to let the other driver enter smoothly. Prime cause of expressway accidents is tailgating, following the car in front too closely, as with our friends up ahead. Experts keep back at least one car length for each 10 miles an hour of speed. They maintain a cushion of distance, and then they keep looking ahead, anticipating. Watch how this young man uses his eyes. Now he's approaching his exit. Watch how he crosses the lanes to get to his off-ramp. First, he signals. He checks his mirrors, a very quick glance at the blind spot, and he accelerates as he moves over one lane. Note that he never changes more than one lane at a time, And he travels at least the length of a football field in that lane before moving to the next. And each time, he signals, checks mirrors, blind spot, accelerates. In night driving, there's one overall answer to what you'll do if. You'll do some solid advanced thinking and rehearsing on lights and their limitations, and the hazards you can avoid by staying within them. Your high beams, for example, can blind the approaching other driver, and who knows what that'll make him do. High beams can even cause trouble from behind. Tilt the mirror just enough to avoid the full glare. Low beam is not so likely to bother the other driver, but you must be careful not to overdrive your own visibility. You overdrive your headlights when you cannot possibly stop in the distance your lights illuminate ahead. Because he overdrove his headlights, this man is forced over the double white line. And he's just lucky there wasn't another overdriver coming toward him. How did it happen? He wasn't going so fast, you'd think, only about 40 miles per hour. But at 40, the normal driver will travel 44 feet from the time he sees the danger to the time his foot hits the brake. Reaction time. He'll travel another 81 feet before his brakes bring the car to a stop. That totals up to 125 feet. And lights on low beam illuminate only 100 feet. A very expensive 25 feet on occasion. On the open road, when there are no cars ahead or approaching, use high beam. But don't be deluded into thinking this gives you perfect visibility. Here's what happened. Lights do not illuminate to the sides. In daylight, the driver would have seen the bicycle in time to slow down smoothly. Lights cannot bend around corners either. During daylight, a slow truck or a stalled car such as this would be visible in plenty of time. But at night, beams of the headlights... Well, that's about it. To sum up, the most marked characteristic of really good driving is smoothness. Nothing sudden. No quick yanks at the wheel, no slamming of brakes. No sudden changes of direction or speed. The good driver drives well ahead of his car. His eye radar picks up the telltales. His mind interprets what he sees, and his body puts it into smooth action. Seldom surprised by anything himself, he makes it a point never to surprise anyone else. And he and she is a joy to ride with. You can think of much pleasanter places to spend your time than in hospitals and police stations. Much more rewarding ways to spend your money than in body shops and courtrooms. And as good a way as any to arrange this happy routine is to play the anticipate game. Because with today's high speeds and loaded roads, what'll I do if is more apt to read what'll I do when. What will you do?
Take a look at this accident. The first vehicle stopped for a red light. The second plowed into it. Now, which driver could have prevented this accident? The guy behind, you say? Well, yes, at first glance, that's the way it seems. But now, here are the facts. Both vehicles were trying to sneak through the light. At the last minute, the lead driver changed his mind and slammed on his brakes. The guy behind had to slam on his brakes, too. But he couldn't stop in time. Now, in all fairness, wouldn't you say that either one of them could have prevented this accident? Yet, you know how you feel when someone who's been riding your tail runs into you. Naturally, it was the other guy's fault. And legally, you're right. The law says that the driver who hits you from the rear is at fault. Okay, So his lawyer gets the case delayed a couple of times, and you lose 2 or 3 days from work. But you don't have to be a sitting duck. There are things that you can do to prevent this type of accident. And that's what we're going to talk about in this film. In most instances, you can prevent being run into by the vehicle behind if you're willing to recognize your responsibility. And you have a definite responsibility to the fellow behind. And here's why. You have several big advantages over him. First of all, you know what you're going to do, and he doesn't. To the fellow in the vehicle behind, you're just a rear end and a tail light. He can't read your mind, and unless you give him some clue, he has to guess. And in today's traffic, guesswork is dangerous. Now, as for your other advantage over the vehicle behind, remember when we talked about reaction distance and braking distance, the two things that together make up stopping distance? Well, when you decide to stop, you've already used up your reaction distance. You've got your foot on the brake. You have only your braking distance to worry about, right? But the fellow behind, he has both reaction distance and braking distance before he can bring his vehicle to a stop. Now, it's simple arithmetic that the sum of these two cannot equal this one. By the time he starts to react, your brakes are already taking hold. He starts braking almost a full second after you do. And if he's riding your bumper, it's physically impossible for him to stop in time. All right? We know ahead of time what we're going to do, and we can stop faster than the fellow behind. So we have a responsibility to keep him informed. Now, there are 3 things that we can and should do. 1, whenever possible, we should make every stop a smooth, gradual stop. 2, we should signal to the driver behind well in advance. And 3, try to keep him from riding your tail. These are the 3 rules for preventing accidents with the vehicle behind. Let's take them one at a time. Make every stop a smooth, gradual stop. Now, this makes sense for a number of reasons. For one thing, those hard, jolting stops are pretty rough on you and on your vehicle, and on your cargo, whether it's freight or passengers. But to get to our main point, if you jam to a sudden stop, he's likely to climb up your tailpipe. Your smooth, gradual stop gives him a better chance to make a safe stop, too. You know, in today's traffic, a driver has only to take his eyes off the road for a moment. Reach for a cigarette. Drop it. Try to get it. And in that second or two that he's distracted, anything can happen. If this distraction happens to the guy behind, he can be on you, on top of you, before you know it. Now, that couple of seconds when I was down there, reaching for that cigarette, well, just imagine something for a moment. Imagine that I'm in this vehicle. Imagine that's you up ahead. If you make the kind of smooth, gradual stop you should, I can bring my vehicle to a good, smooth stop also. At least I have the clue and more time to stop. But if you stop suddenly, you've got me on top of you before either of us knows what's happened. So it's mighty important to remember to make every stop a smooth, gradual stop. And it's equally important to signal to the driver behind well in advance and check your rear view mirrors to see if he's responding. Now, we wouldn't need this rule if every vehicle were equipped with a walkie-talkie device. Wouldn't that be something? You know, we could talk to the guy in the vehicle behind, tell him we intend to stop a half block up the street, or I'm going to turn left the next corner, or slow down to find the street number. At least we could be sure he knew what we were going to do. Well, we don't have such a device as this. But we do have our signals, hand and automatic. Now, these were invented in the first place to give the guy behind a break. But we've got to signal soon enough. Signals won't do much good if we wait till the vehicle behind is on top of us. We should know what we're going to do far enough ahead of the place we're going to do it to give the proper signal in plenty of time. And now that brings us to our third point. Try to keep him from riding your tail. Now, you've seen signs like this before, haven't you? Some guys get a kick out of slapping them on the back of their vehicles. But there's a better way of handling the guy who rides your rear bumper. Sure, it's an uncomfortable feeling when you're in that vehicle ahead and the fellow behind is hanging right onto your tail. It's uncomfortable for this reason. You know that if you have to stop suddenly, he's liable to just keep coming on. Now, what can you do about it? Start slowing down. That's what you do. Look, when you start slowing down, one of two things will happen. Usually, you'll make that fellow behind so impatient that he'll swing out and pass you, and you'll be rid of him. Or if he stays behind you and there happens to be another vehicle ahead of you, when you slow down, you start to widen the distance between you and the driver ahead of you. This wider distance acts as a safety cushion for you if you have to stop. It gives you more space to stop in, so you can stop gradually. And as you come to a gradual stop, the vehicle behind can come to a gradual stop also. In other words, you are giving yourself enough room to force him to stop gradually. That's the way to handle the vehicle behind, to keep him from riding your tail. And that's good defensive driving. And it pays real dividends. All right, let's take another look at those three things we can do to prevent accidents with the vehicle behind. 1, make every stop a smooth, gradual stop. Only in rare instances is an emergency stop necessary. 2, signal to the driver behind well in advance. You know what you're going to do, and it's your responsibility to let him know also. And 3, try to keep him from riding your tail. If you do these things, you'll prevent a lot of accidents involving the vehicle behind. And you'll find it makes the job of driving easier, too. But don't take my word for it. Try it for yourself and see.
This is winter, when highway travel is surrounded with a special beauty, a beauty fraught with delays, frustrations, dangers, and hazards. Do you recognize these dangers that are ever present along the icy roads and around each slippery curve? Is your car ready for the winter months ahead? Have you mastered the technique of starting on ice or snow, of keeping going in the right direction, of stopping when the road is a glare of ice? For 15 years, a task force of experts from state and federal governments, researchers from universities, and engineers from the automotive industry have met under the auspices of the National Safety Council to study the problems of winter driving and to find the answers so that a better informed driving public will be a safer driving public. Later, this test information is analyzed and the findings prepared into reports and manuals for driving instructors. Safety tips to help you with your winter driving. Are for the weather to come. Put in antifreeze. Check the wiper blade, the windshield washer and defroster systems. Agents spray a stubborn film on car windshields. Check the exhaust system for leaks. Carbon monoxide is odorless, treacherous, and it can be fatal even in small quantities. Check the battery. Cold weather puts a greater demand on your car's electrical system. Put on your snow tires for that extra margin of traction that will help you get going. And don't forget, the front tires need a good deep tread to assist in steering and braking on slippery roads. Check the tire pressure. Normal pressures are recommended. Always carry reinforced tire chains in the trunk, ready for use in heavy snow or when the road is icy. They won't be any help at all if they're back in the garage and you're blocking traffic. Now you're ready. The first snow has come and you're late for work, school, or shopping. But wait. Clean off that snow before you try to move. Loosen up the wiper blades. They might be frozen. And wipe off the outside rear view mirror. Brush the snow off the rear window. Now the inside rear view mirror can be used for that extra margin of safety. Open one of the rear side windows to keep the glass from fogging. Fasten your seat belt. Make this a habit, and it won't be crammed down behind the seat cushion in that instant when you wish you had it on. Ready? Then start off, but like the turtle, take it easy. Spinning the wheels won't get you anywhere. You'll just dig a hole for the car to sink into. Getting ready to go so far has involved only common sense. Getting rolling when the snow is deep requires some special techniques. Why do they always leave the biggest snow piles next to your car? If you're not bogged down so that chains, a shovel, or a wrecker are the only answer, then you can try rocking. Get the car moving backwards and forwards by rhythmic shifting between forward and reverse, without spinning the wheels and digging yourself in deeper, until you have enough momentum to carry you through the drift. Once in motion, the problem arises of keeping headed in the right direction. What special driving habits and techniques must we learn to keep the car on the highway and avoid unexpected hazards? When snow and ice conditions prevail, those tire chains in the trunk are your best bet. They're easy to put on if you know how. And here's a tip on how. Notice the chains were fastened when last put away to keep them from tangling. Lay the chains on the ground with the reinforcements up and the side fasteners to the rear. Check for any twists or tangles, and be sure the reinforcements are up. Adjust the applier to fit the tire. That's the heavy piece of wire that comes with most sets of chains. Hook the applier into the front end of the side chains, and push the applier and the chain onto the tire. Gather the chain in back of the wheel so that it will not catch. Now move the car forward slowly until the side chain fasteners are about axle high. Remove the applier and save it. Saw the chain to remove the slack, then hook and lock the inside fastener first. Hook and lock the outside fastener with the chain pulled up as snugly as possible. Retighten as needed to keep the chain snug. And now you're ready to go. But even with chains, take it easy, please. Here in graphic form are the results of carefully conducted tests at Clintonville, Wisconsin. They illustrate the starting, pulling, or hill climbing ability on glare ice. A car with regular tires, deep tread, and proper pressure will pull about 100 pounds. With snow tires, 125 pounds, some improvement. With regular tire chains, 330 pounds pull, a considerable improvement. With reinforced tire chains having projecting teeth or cleats on each link, 510 pounds, over 5 times better than the standard tire. On packed snow, performance is substantially better. Regular tires, 400 pounds. Snow tires, 600 pounds. With reinforced chains, 1,200 pounds. This information is based on hundreds of test runs, and they all show that winter driving is different. On snow or ice, your traction is only a fraction of what it would be on dry pavement. Now that you're rolling, let's see what the problems are. On ice, you may not be able to turn when you want to. This car is not turning even when the steering wheel is rotated. Enter a curve slowly. Turn the wheel slowly to take advantage of the maximum turning power of the front tires. If you oversteer, straighten a bit, then turn again. Too much gas on a turn and the rear wheels will spin and your car may go into an uncontrolled skid. When you feel the wheels slip, ease off on the gas pedal. When your rear wheels start to skid, turn the front wheels in the direction of the skid and stay away from the brakes. Locked wheels may make the skid worse. Remember to drive slowly on any slippery road. 20 miles an hour on ice may be too fast for the same curve that you can take at 60 on dry pavement. In starting or accelerating to make a grade, do so gently. Use a slow, sure touch to help the tires bite in. Watch for the danger spots, intersections, driveways, curves, hills, snowdrifts. Slow up before you get to them. Afterwards, it may be too late. We've seen how difficult it is to get started on ice and snow. Well, it's just as hard to come to a safe stop. The important thing is not to lock your wheels. When wheels are locked or sliding, you lose steering control. To slow down or stop, pump the brakes. Apply the brakes quickly for an instant, then release, on and off. Once or twice a second until you've stopped. Do not freeze on the brake pedal. You'll almost certainly go into an uncontrollable skid. Pumping the brakes keeps you headed in the right direction when stopping and steering. Don't touch the parking brake. It locks the rear wheels and you may get a quick look at the surrounding scenery. About like this. Safe winter driving means more care and less speed, and an easy touch on the brakes and gas. Try your brakes occasionally when the road is clear, and keep plenty of space between you and the car ahead. Snow tires and chains can afford a significant margin of safety in stopping as well as starting on ice and snow. Here are the test facts. At 20 miles per hour on dry pavement, the average car with regular tires can stop in 21 feet. On glare ice, it takes 195 feet, 10 car lengths. With snow tires, 174 feet. With regular tire chains, 99 feet. With reinforced tire chains, 77 feet, still over 3 times the distance of regular tires on dry pavement. In loosely packed snow at 20 miles per hour, regular tires stop the average car in 60 feet. Snow tires in 52 feet. With regular tire chains, 46 feet. And with reinforced tire chains, 38 feet. but that is still nearly twice as far as regular tires on drive pavement. You can't do much about the weather, but you can be prepared for it. Let's review the important things for you to remember. Have good tires. Snow tires are recommended. Use reinforced tire chains for severe conditions, heavy snow or glare ice. Always carry chains so you won't be a traffic blocker. Check that the windshield wiper, the heater and defroster are working properly. Clean the snow and ice from all windows and ventilate to prevent windows from fogging. Get the feel of the road. Try the gas and brakes as highway conditions permit, and then adjust your speed to road and weather conditions. Follow at a safe distance. It takes 3 to 12 times as far to stop on snow or ice as it does on dry pavement. Pump the brakes to maintain good control when stopping on ice or snow. That's the story. We all know that driving conditions are hazardous during the winter. It's up to you to winterize your car. It's up to all of us to winter-wise our driving.
Tested attempts to align a movable rod with a stationary one. If the movable rod comes to a stop in advance of the stationary rod, the driver perceives objects to be farther away than they actually are. By using various colored rods, the effect of color on depth perception can be determined. About 1 out of every 4 people tested proved to have a visual deficiency in judging distance. The perimeter is used for measuring side vision. The man being tested was found to have 75 degrees of side vision on his right. Side vision is important in detecting cars approaching from the side, when leaving parking places, at intersections, or when pedestrians step out from the curb. Good drivers avoid looking directly into oncoming headlights by concentrating on the shoulder of the road. This machine measures the effect of glare upon the eyes and the time required for them to distinguish objects on the road. Equally as important as good vision is a fast reaction time. This gun device is used to test reaction time and braking distance. The tester, riding with the driver, pulls a string firing the gun, which projects a yellow chalk pellet marking the pavement. When the driver hears the gun fired, he applies his brakes as quickly as possible. The change in momentum as the brakes are applied swings the device and fires a second shell, which marks the end of the reaction distance. Where the car stops marks the end of the braking distance. In a test conducted at 20 miles per hour, the driver reacted in approximately 3/4 of a second, during which he traveled 21 feet. The braking distance was 23 feet, making a total stopping distance of 44 feet on a dry, level pavement. 44 feet is about 3 car lengths and is a good average figure. At 40 miles per hour, even under controlled conditions, it required 9 car lengths to stop. The important fact to remember is that when speed is doubled, it requires 4 times the distance to stop after the brakes are applied. And here we see from the car a test at 60 miles per hour. Few drivers realize that at this speed it takes nearly 300 feet to stop. This demonstrates the fallacy of the old stop on a dime story. The following scenes of law infractions and unsafe driving are unrehearsed and unstaged, and you will see many of them when driving. In taking these pictures, the camera was mounted on the outside of our car, giving the appearance that we were driving on the wrong side of the road, which we assure you was not the case. The cameraman was at all times accompanied by a highway patrol officer. Each of us should know and avoid the basic driving errors, which are responsible for approximately 80% of the traffic accidents which result in deaths, injuries, and extensive damage. These are speeding, improper overtaking and passing, no right-of-way, following too closely, improper turning, driving on the wrong side of the highway, and failure to observe before backing or misjudging clearances while backing. The outstanding cause of accidents is speeding. This is the popular conception of what is meant when we say a driver was speeding. For those who study traffic accidents, however, speeding is going too fast in relation to conditions of visibility, road surface and width, curves, slope, the amount of traffic, and the weather. You may very easily be speeding at 10 or 15 miles per hour if conditions are adverse. Careful drivers always consider these factors and measure their speed accordingly. The poorest condition should determine your maximum speed. Everything may be perfect as far as road width, no curves, dips, or traffic, yet poor conditions, such as limited vision due to fog or icy roads, may create hazards which would make 10 miles per hour speeding. This serious accident was caused by the car skidding on a wet pavement and turning over twice before stopping. Under certain conditions, drivers may create a traffic hazard by driving too slowly, as this chap is doing, by driving below a normal rate of speed on the inside lane of a 4-lane highway. Through holding up traffic, he is encouraging drivers to take unnecessary chances in passing him. If you would drive slowly on an open highway, show consideration for your fellow drivers by staying in the right-hand lane. The law requires you to do so, and it is safer and may keep you from getting a ticket. Almost as big a factor in the death toll as speeding is improper overtaking and passing. This automobile and its occupants were victims of such a violation. Almost all state laws governing overtaking and passing require that the pass be started with sufficient space so that the vehicle doing the passing will not cut in on the vehicle being passed and will be back in the proper lane before any oncoming cars are within 100 feet. 100 feet is a very narrow margin of safety, as it is less than 1 second of time at even the slow passing speed of 35 miles per hour. Safety authorities recommend that much greater distances be allowed. A good way of judging safe passing distance is to observe carefully the oncoming vehicle, and if it appears to be standing still, there is sufficient space to pass. Here we are making a pass in the proper manner. Notice that we stay back far enough to see and judge conditions up ahead. Now we are sure that we can make the pass safely as the vehicle approaching appears to stand still. We pick up speed quickly so that the vehicle we are passing cannot start a race with us. Before you return to your lane of traffic, always check your rear-view mirror to be sure you don't cut in. The right-of-way laws of the Pacific Coast states are not completely uniform. However, the important point is that a defensive driver thinks less of his rights of way and more of preventing accidents. We're all familiar with the poems about Joe Dokes, who was right, dead right, as he sped along, but he's just as dead as if he'd been wrong. In leaving a parking space, you must yield the right-of-way to passing traffic. Here, a driver pulls out from the curb properly. He has signaled and he has looked to be sure the way is clear. At intersections, you must yield the right-of-way to pedestrians. Here, a driver stopping at an intersection does so before entering the crosswalk. This conforms to the law and does not inconvenience or endanger pedestrians. We should approach all intersections at a speed which will enable us to stop before entering, if necessary, to avoid a collision. This car is forced to wait for traffic approaching from his left, which has failed to yield the right-of-way as required by law. While this truck is complying with the law by yielding to traffic approaching from his right. Here is a driver in position for a left turn. He yields to the vehicles approaching from the opposite direction until a safe interval appears when he can complete the turn. Those multiple car crashes which occur frequently and involve many cars usually result from the bumper chasing habit. Following too closely is one of the most common driving errors. It is especially dangerous to engage in bumper chasing when entering dark tunnels from the bright sunlight. Because practically all drivers are guilty of bumper chasing at one time or another, the front grille business has never known a depression. Proper following distances are those which leave space for a reaction distance and a braking distance. For the average driver, these distances are 3 car lengths at 15 miles per hour, 7 at 30 miles per hour, and 13 at 45 miles per hour. Remember these magic numbers, 3, 7, and 13. They will save your grille and needless expense and inconvenience. A frequent cause of accidents is making improper left turns. The common complaint against women drivers is that they don't signal. They make left turns from the gutter and right turns from the center of the street. Statistics show these driving faults are definitely not confined to women. By making left turns properly, you cause a minimum of disturbance to other traffic, and those behind you can pass to the right. Drivers of large trucks have particular trouble in complying with the law, yet it can be done. This driver is making a proper right turn. He keeps his truck close enough to the curb so that no one can be caught in a squeeze play between the truck and the curb. And now we come to an item that is not a cause, but rather a type of accident, the backing accident. Fully half of backing accidents occur because the driver backs into something he did not know was there. This cautious father checks carefully and moves his child to the driver's side of the car so that he can keep an eye on him while backing. When parking on hills, in addition to setting the brake, turn the front wheels so the curb will prevent the car from rolling downhill. If the car is facing down the hill, turn the front wheels inward. When facing uphill, turn the front wheels outward and resting against the curb. Safety authorities say you should plan your driving to avoid backing. They say most backing accidents result from where and how you park. Here is a driver who just abandons his car without a thought of the backing he will have to do when leaving the space. This time he parks so that his forward motion will be unobstructed. No backing accidents for him now. Green lights are not speed-up signals. One should always be prepared to stop, as drivers crossing the intersections may have yellow fever and jump their signal. When driving, be alert, always ready for the unexpected. You don't know what the other fellow will do. But if you make a conscientious effort to drive safely at all times, you will not be guilty of contributing to the terrific toll of the highways. Throughout the West, the call of the open road beckons with numberless scenic attractions to be enjoyed. Don't let your enjoyment of them be marred by unfortunate and unnecessary accidents. laws and regulations, good roads and warning signs, enforcement agencies, the constant endeavors of safety councils and automobile associations to promote safety are all in the public interest. In the final analysis, however, accidents can only be prevented when each of us accepts personal responsibility for making our highways safe. This film has shown you the outstanding driving errors which are responsible for the majority of traffic casualties and how you may avoid them. You may never find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but if you apply the golden rule of driving as you wish the other fellow would drive, you will live longer and happier. You will be doing your part to make our highways safe. It's up to you.
She said she didn't like to talk to boys about serious things, but with me, it was different. How about that?
Sometimes an automobile can seem like a world in itself, a pleasant, free world where the driver can be alone with his inmost thoughts.
Thank heaven Jim left me the car today. I have so much to do.
And an automobile can seem like a miraculous time and labor-saving device to someone who doesn't have the use of it very often. It makes all those errands almost enjoyable.
Plenty of zip in there now. What a difference that tune-up made.
To drive an automobile today is to be absolute ruler over a package of concentrated horsepower that would have been the envy of the greatest rulers of the ancient world.
That first order sold out in less than a week. Now, if I can just keep them coming from the factory.
The smooth functioning automobiles of today simply do not demand our whole attention. We drive them almost as if we were passengers in them.
The girls picked a perfect day for the luncheon. Now, I think they said Walnut Street. Or was it Oak?
Often the farthest thing from the mind of a driver is the real possibility of misfortune or accident. In a way, perhaps that's as it should be. When life is good and driving the car is a treat, and the driver is not doing wrong, why should there be a moment's thought of danger to shadow that good feeling of security? Well, because above everything else, a driver must constantly keep in mind what his basic responsibility is. Sometimes, just when an automobile seems like another world all by itself, there may be someone in another car around the next corner in this world, ready to shatter those pleasant thoughts. The responsible driver's thoughts must be on driving, 100%. And that means they must project ahead of his car and all around his car. Over 22% of all the people killed in motor vehicle traffic accidents in the past 5 years died as a result of accidents at intersections. Remember, there are two basic standards for determining who has the right-of-way at intersections where there is no visible traffic control. The first car rule says that when two or more cars are approaching the intersection in a lawful manner, the car that moves into the intersection first has the right-of-way. Obviously, a driver with good judgment would never try to claim his right-of-way at the risk of causing an accident. The same time rule says that when both cars reach the intersection at the same time, the car on the right has the right-of-way. Of course, at the intersection, the safe driver with good judgment, skill, and proper training doesn't indulge in legal hair-splitting about who must yield. It's best never to take anything for granted. A green light means you have the right-of-way, but it's not guaranteed. Be prepared at every intersection to yield or to use avoidance maneuvers. And the rule of good manners, as well as responsible driving, is always to yield to pedestrians. And incidentally, if the intersection is engineered with a special turn lane, pull over and get all the way out of the traffic stream until you can turn safely. Keep your front wheels pointed straight ahead so you won't be knocked into oncoming traffic if you should be hit from behind. It is well to have your mind quite clear about the meaning of signs and signals at intersections. The flashing yellow light means proceed through the intersection or pass the signal slowly and with caution. The flashing red light means stop before entering the intersection or at a clearly marked line, and then yield the right-of-way to all vehicles on the through street or highway before entering the intersection. The rule is the same as for a stop sign. A yield sign is somewhat like a stop sign, except that it does not require a full stop unless there is actual cross-traffic present that must be given the right-of-way. Driving today involves some rather complex skills, judgment, and knowledge, and only practice can keep them fresh. The variety of situations encountered each day makes a valuable contribution to a driver's reserve of experience. When an unpracticed driver's mind is preoccupied with errands and the situation is a bit unfamiliar, the shadow of tragedy can be very close. The expressway entrance ramp is the place to build up speed in anticipation of the fast traffic ahead. Inexperienced drivers who stop or are hesitant about entering the expressway traffic create a situation in which regular users of the expressway who expect to move quickly through the entrance might run right into the stopped car, perhaps even knock it into the oncoming expressway traffic. And there's another hazard. An uncertain, hesitant driver stopped at the merging point can't really see the safe gaps in the stream of oncoming traffic and, unless there is a big gap, can't start up fast enough to fit in without danger. Expressways and toll roads sometimes seem to be the nearest thing to flying. But don't be fooled. They require a special level of skill and concentration. Getting off has as many fine points as getting on. A responsible driver starts the turn signals in plenty of time to let other drivers know there's going to be a lane change. And then, checking both mirrors and the blind spot, changes lanes gradually. On the expressway, drivers tend to get adjusted to steady high speeds. The speedometer is the only reliable indicator of speed, while the driver's senses are readjusting to new, lower speed levels. But learning these things on the road in hazardous traffic situations is the wrong way. Heavily traveled roads are not the best place to try to get experience. The horsepower under the hood of many of today's cars gives the driver a personal sensation of power. But even though he can do much to conquer time and distance with this machine, he can't tame the weather with it. No car has power over the elements, and the driver must conform to changing conditions or else. At today's highway speeds, when there's water on the pavement, a car can behave just as if it were on ice. A skid can be a heart-stopping experience, but every driver can learn how to control a skidding car. In a skid, the rear end of the car tends to brake from a straight line and come around toward the front. If the rear end of your car slides to the left, you quickly countersteer to the left. If the rear end swings to the right, steer to the right, then straighten out. Remember, if the rear slides left, quickly steer left. If the rear slides right, steer right. In a power skid, the rear wheels break loose either because you accelerate too quickly or go into a turn too fast. Let up on the gas immediately and steer out of it as you slow down. In the locked wheel skid, your front wheels aren't rolling, so you have no way to steer the car. You handle the locked wheel skid by keeping the wheels rolling. That means you never jam on the brakes. Pump the brakes. That is, apply them and release them in a quick pumping motion. It gives you rolling friction and control of your car. Of course, tires are a factor in skid control. Tests show that tires with good deep treads need less stopping distance on wet, smooth surfaces. What sort of surfaces to look for is very important in identifying skid situations. It doesn't take a hard rain to make a pavement slick. When oily film collects on the surface, just a small amount of moisture produces an extremely slippery situation. Besides damp, wet, icy, and snowy surfaces, a pavement or portion of pavement covered with fallen leaves can put a car into a skid. Loose gravel is another dangerous skid producer. The good driver is aware of what sort of surface is under his wheels and adjusts to the condition. On wet surfaces, there are many safety factors to consider. The texture of the pavement, the amount of water standing on it, the inflation of the tires, the type of tire tread, and above all, the car's speed. Even with good tires, a car going 45 miles an hour on flooded pavement just can't make the same curve it took successfully at 40. In the rain, even a well-drained road holds a film of water that may range from less than 1/10 of an inch to 1/2 inch in depth. At low speeds, the water can be drained out through the tire tread pattern. At higher speeds, a wedge of water starts to form at the front of the contact area, and even with good tread, as the speed gets higher or the water film on the pavement gets thicker, the wedge builds up and moves farther under the tire until it actually lifts the tire right off the pavement, and the tires are just sliding along on top of the water film. They're hydroplaning. Well, that's just fine for boats or water skiers, but extremely dangerous on the highway. To learn about the hydroplaning effect on airplane tires, the National Aeronautics and Space Agency set up complex scientific equipment to observe what actually happens during this phenomenon. They ran a test wheel and tire through water and photographed the effect from below on a glass pavement. Slow-motion photography showed the contact of a tire running in 1/2 inch of water at 25 miles an hour. The tire remained in contact, but there was a partial loss of traction, even at this speed. Then the experimental run was repeated at 50 miles an hour with the same wet pavement condition. The test showed a complete absence of contact between the tire and the surface. There was no traction whatever. In full hydroplaning, the tire is actually riding on a layer of water. Control is no more possible than if the car were on ice. NASA studies show new tires will hydroplane in less than 1/2 inch of water and smooth tires in less than 1/10 inch of water, according to the following specifications. They'll hydroplane at 42 miles an hour at a tire pressure of 16 pounds. They'll hydroplane at 51 miles an hour at a tire pressure of 24 pounds. They'll hydroplane at 59 miles an hour at a tire pressure of 32 pounds. Partial and full hydroplaning can be clearly demonstrated in the Automobile Tire Test Laboratory. A revolving drum represents the pavement. The tire is under an 800-pound load, representing the weight on one wheel of a car. Water equivalent to normal heavy showers is put on the drum beneath the tire. As the speed is increased, a water wedge penetrates farther and farther under the tire. Then there is partial hydroplaning. Traction is lost and the tire slows down until at 60 miles an hour it just stops. As it drifts out of contact at this hydroplaning speed, it can easily be moved backwards and forwards by hand under an 800-pound load. That's what actually happens on the wet highway, as demonstrations with test cars have repeatedly shown. On rain-covered roads at 50 or 60 miles an hour or more, your car wheels may hydroplane even with good new tires. So slow down when it's wet. Be especially alert for a heavy film of water on the pavement. Knowing the facts about hydroplaning could save your life. In bad weather or good, when it comes to not being involved in fatal automobile accidents, or any type of driving accidents for that matter, the drivers between 50 and 59 show the best record statistically. Could this be a matter of mature judgment? Oh, no! Blowouts can still happen. Here's what to do if one happens to you. Don't panic. Don't hit the brakes. Let up on the accelerator, hold a straight course, and let the car slow itself down. You can use the brakes lightly, only after you're sure you're holding a steady, straight course down the road. Normally, it takes only 12 pounds of pressure to control the steering wheel. A rear wheel blowout is actually a little more dangerous because you don't have the direct steering control you have on a front wheel to compensate for erratic moves the car may make. If applying the brakes lightly makes the car unsteady, concentrate on steering and just let the car slow itself down and come to a halt naturally. The possible reasons for a blowout include inexperience or carelessness in the repair of a tubeless tire, and driver abuse, such as thoughtlessly hitting sharp objects and curbs or ignoring tire pressures, thus building up destructive heat and breaking down sidewalls. And there's another important cause of blowouts: sustained high-speed driving on a tire that is not built for that kind of travel. Most responsible drivers try to do all they can to make an automobile trip as safe as possible. They get the car in shape, inflate the tires according to the latest technical information available, and they're a little more conscientious than usual about their seat belts. The seatbelt problem is an interesting study in human nature. People will usually buckle up for long trips, but may not use their seat belts for nearby driving. And yet, statistics indicate that 80% of all automobile accidents occur within 25 miles of home. Perhaps a greater realization of the impact forces that are generated in automobile accidents might help the people who have not yet formed the firm habit of using their seat belts. When a car smashes to a stop, the unrestrained human body continues to move forward at driving speed. Then the body impacts and whips into recoil positions. The driver or passenger wearing a buckled-up seatbelt or shoulder harness simply increases his or her chances for survival amidst the overwhelming forces that can be unleashed in an accident. In a collision, unprotected and unrestrained drivers and passengers fly about the car and out of the car with no chance to control or protect themselves. If you, as a driver, are for some reason not concerned about saving yourself, at least keep in mind others riding with you who may feel differently. Remember that in an emergency, your buckled-up seatbelt can keep you from being knocked unconscious and keep you close to the controls of your car, where your actions may be able to protect the safety, perhaps save the life of someone important to you, someone you love. Remembering to buckle up seatbelts or other restraining devices is just part of the responsible driver's preparation. On long trips or short jaunts, the driver with good judgment also makes it a point to learn exactly where to go before entering an unfamiliar area. The hazard of trying to locate signs and street house numbers while driving can sometimes produce near tragic consequences. The other driver may not always be so good at evasive maneuvers. A driver who is concentrating very hard on something else doesn't have too much chance of remembering turn signals unless the habit of using them has become absolutely automatic. It shouldn't take a near collision to make the turn signal habit unforgettable. It's simply a matter of knowledge and self-training in a variety of situations. If you're going to turn left at an intersection, you have a responsibility to start your left turn signal soon enough, at least 100 feet from the corner, so that everyone around you knows what you intend to do. If you're going to turn right, put your right signal on at a point where there will be no question about whether you're turning at the next intersection or at a driveway. As a driver, you constantly have the responsibility of informing those around you of your intentions. Oddly enough, it is very often when no other cars are around, when a driver is alone on the road, that the shadow of tragedy hovers closest. In these situations, a few drivers are lucky, but most are not. According to latest National Safety Council figures, 1/3 of all fatal motor vehicle accidents in rural areas and 1/4 of all fatal motor vehicle accidents are run-off-the-roadway accidents. Some tragic cases begin with the dropping of the outside wheels off the edge of a pavement that is higher than the shoulder. When that happens, the wheels catch along the rim of the pavement and can't easily be steered back. If it happens to you, let up slowly on the accelerator. Don't get impatient or embarrassed. Use the brakes very lightly. Don't try to jerk the wheels back by putting heavy pressure on the steering wheel. After slowing to a safe speed, feel the contact. Then, when you can gradually ease the wheels over, do so. In a large proportion of run-off-the-roadway accidents, although no one is alive to say exactly what happened, it seems clear that the driver in some way had lost control of the car. If you're not in condition to drive, don't. Keep yourself alert, aware of what's going on. The responsible driver concentrates on his driving, continuously shows good judgment, and puts distractions out of his mind. The primary task, once you are behind the wheel of a car, is to get yourself and others to your destination without harm. Just getting into a car and putting it in motion is a fairly mechanical act. But safe, skillful driving is not automatic, not something you do with one small part of your mind while the rest thinks of something else. Safe driving in today's traffic is largely a matter of judgment, and that includes courtesy, experience, knowledge, and constant awareness of the developing situation. Driving a car involves social as well as legal responsibilities, and each driver who takes his responsibilities seriously is a helpful example to those around him. The more skill and judgment you show others, the more you contribute to general driving improvement and safety.
Respect the machine we are entrusted with. The automobile is a necessity from our American way of life. It is the greatest force in our constantly expanding economy. Just try to imagine where we would be without it. But don't forget, it is also a projectile, capable of far in excess of 100 hours, weighing over 1 ton, made of thin, razor-sharp, and sometimes jagged steel. surrounded by glass that can splinter into 1,000 pieces, and filled with high-octane, fierce-burning gasoline. These pictures, taken at the scenes of just a few accidents, will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that we, the drivers, have got to do better. The members of the Suicide Club believe that everyone will have to learn defensive driving sooner or later, and we pray it will be sooner. We call defensive driving the first rule of how to drive properly yourself, obey all traffic rules, be polite and considerate, and above all, watch out for the other fellow. Consider the possibility that every other driver you meet on the road may be drunk, blind, or just plain stupid. Drive defensively and be prepared to meet any move he makes with strong, evasive action. Glancing through the wallet for identification. It might be the only way they could ever identify this man. What could have caused this accident? It was broad daylight on the open road. One of the survivors sitting in the back seat said the driver of the car he was in was turning around in his seat to talk to him, when he suddenly went over the center line and into the other car. A defensive driver would not do that, but thousands of people do, and is a deadly habit. Emily Post may say it is polite to look at the person you are talking to, but not while driving an automobile. If you are driving on a through highway and see a car coming from a side road, take your foot off the accelerator and be ready to put it on the brake. How do you know the other fellow sees the stoplight? You don't, so you haven't lost 10 seconds by taking your foot off the accelerator until you are sure he's going to stop. One of these drivers didn't stop at a crossroad. This is part of what the coroner or the ambulance driver will have to scrape off this automobile. It's part of a human being. They wear gloves for this gruesome job. And all they can do is bundle up what's left in a sheet and place it on the stretcher. That twisted mass of wreckage and those broken human bodies are not pleasant to look at. This one they'll have to pry out. The officer says, don't stop and look. Drive by. This car was tossed into a ditch upon collision with a truck and completely demolished. Again, it's broad daylight, and look at those skid marks. Well, they're pulling what's left of the truck out of the ditch. 5 died here, and you can see why. And here's the other car. You can't even imagine the terrific impact necessary to do this. 2 cars colliding at 60 miles an hour create the same force as if you drove your car off a 12-story building. Next time you're up 12 stories, take a look out. Well, the usual lineup of cars stopped because of an accident somewhere ahead. Every day, day in and day out, this goes on in all 50 of our states. Unless you've seen these kind of accidents, you cannot realize the terrible masses that automobiles and trucks become of twisted steel, broken glass, often flaming gasoline. This is one of the lucky ones. She apparently is still alive. This is one of the unluckier ones. Look at that pretty little teenage girl, killed at the very beginning of her prime, and killed because she was riding with a teenage boy let him buy and drive a $50 casket on wheels. Mechanical failure in a reasonably new car very seldom is the cause of death, but a lot of old cars should be off the highway. Speeding at night is even worse than speeding in the daytime. A lot of people don't realize it, but you cannot see as well at night as you can in the daytime. Almost all states have recognized this fact, and they have established a lower speed limit at night than they have during the daylight hours. But lots of people don't believe it. They go right along at 60, 70, 80 miles an hour at night, and that's when some of these horrible accidents take place. This is one of the most horrible I have ever seen. This young man was cut completely in half, as you can see by this picture. It happened because he drove his sports car too fast at night, 80 miles an hour, when he lost control. And these are the legs, the other part of his body. It's inconceivable that this can happen in an automobile, but it does all the time. Another nighttime accident, and they are the worst on the highways. You know, drinking can be the cause of many fatal accidents. In a recent survey in 4 larger cities, 82% of the drivers involved in really horrible accidents had had 1 or more drinks. The armed services are greatly concerned with the number of deaths by automobile, and many of by drinking and driving. You can't blame a young man for wanting to have fun on his lead. You mothers and fathers in an automobile while on leave than there are in training accidents. That one must be still alive because they strapped the legs to the stretcher. That's to keep them from bouncing around in the ambulance. This one apparently is not alive, so they will leave him for a later ambulance. This was a beautiful young woman out driving with a speed maniac. He hit a telephone pole while trying to go around a curve too fast. And it's almost unbelievable what happened to this girl. Both arms were torn from her body and both legs. She was almost decapitated. As you can see, the whole top of her head is gone. Here's another view of the same horrible accident. The same result, as always, of too much speed at night. There's one of her feet, torn completely from her body and shoeless. There's another man that hit a tree late at night at high speed. His head is almost welded to that door frame, and he is very, very dead. Here's another nighttime accident. In any city, on any country rural lane, all night long you can hear the wail of the ambulances going to and from death on the highway. Many times these accidents are caused by excessive driving for the conditions. There goes another load, not to the hospital but to the morgue. Well, it's daytime again, and here's the familiar scene. Cars parked along the road, smoke billowing in the air. And this was really the most horrible that have ever happened. There were 5 cars involved, 16 people dead or injured. Every car in the accident took fire and burned. And burning is a horrible way to die. 2 beautiful young teenagers. Another young man gone to his maker. No one knows exactly what caused this accident, but a farmer working in a nearby field said all of the cars involved were traveling at excessive speeds. One of them swerved over the center line and hit another, and from then on it was just bang, bang, bang. That's what the man there was looking at, and that's what death by burning in an automobile looks like. Not a pretty sight. Oh. But we are trying to impress upon everyone that sees this film that this sort of thing goes on day after day after day. This is more of the same accident. Here are bodies that have been dragged way out into the field to keep them from catching fire. There was lots of traffic on the road at the time, so there was help available almost immediately. That man apparently has survived so far. Here's one that didn't, one that was caught in one of the burning cars. That's a small boy, about 8 or 10 years of age, I should imagine. Burned to a crisp. These people that see these accidents on the road are lucky in some respects, because I've talked to police officers who have told me that after an accident like this, they don't even have to patrol the road anymore. Everyone drives very considerately and like they always should, but seldom do unless they see something like this. Every ambulance for miles around was pressed into service for this particular accident. There's 4 more bodies they haven't picked up yet. The end of the road for one more human being. And still another. You know, the Suicide Club receives thousands of pictures from newspaper photographers, from people who have seen this film and have managed to take a picture of some accident. And many times we get a letter from a father telling us that his son has been killed, the son that was too young to have a driver's license. But the father left the key in the car and went off to work, and the son just helped himself and was killed. Here's another case of driving too fast for the conditions. It was slippery. Here's another serviceman killed in a horrible accident away from his base. And here's still another Air Force man. You can't believe that a man trained to fly a plane at speeds in excess of the speed of sound can have so little respect for an automobile, which can kill you just as quickly as an airplane. The last picture is of 2 little tykes that were killed by a drunken driver. He scraped them along a brick wall for more than 500 feet, tore their arms from their little bodies, and killed them instantly. These children belong to a friend of mine, a neighbor, and as long as I live, I will never forget the horrible picture that these little ones made lying along the side of the road, dead. This is Dean Robinson, president of the Suicide Club. I hope it has made a view. It has of me.